Hello, I'm John Love from Digital Commerce 360, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Top 5 B2B e-commerce pain points and how to solve them. Thanks for joining us. Today's broadcast is sponsored by LucidWorks. Experts predict that by 2025, 80% of B2B sales interactions between suppliers and buyers will occur in digital channels. With increasing numbers of online buyers expecting enhanced e-commerce capabilities, a lackluster digital experience can hurt your business's ability to gain and retain customers. Today on our webinar, we will learn about the top 5 most common pain points that B2B e-commerce companies face when building their digital experiences, techniques and tools to solve those challenges, and how to leverage technology and buyer intent to provide first-class personalization to drive revenue and customer retention. Today, we are joined by LucidWorks Head of Industry, Sanjay Mehta, and also LucidWorks Program Manager for GTM Solutions, Garrett Schwegler. They will share their data and expertise on the top 5 B2B e-commerce pain points and how to solve them. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get going. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation, but you can ask them at any time using the chat box on the right side of your screen. You can also use that box to let us know of any technical difficulties you are having, and someone will help you out with that. With that, I will turn it over to Sanjay and Garrett.
Thank you, John. So welcome everybody. My name's Sanjay Mehta. I am Head of Industry for e-commerce here at LucidWorks. And yeah, just a little background. I've spent about 20 years and most of my career in e-commerce, working with many leading software vendors, including commerce platforms and search. We're working with hundreds of B2B organizations, both big and small. I'm excited to be here with you today. And on the other side of when I'm not, working in e-commerce, I also enjoy playing a little live music here, playing a little jazz drums at a venue here in Chicago way back in the day.
Thanks, Sanjay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm excited to be here and talk about one of our favorite topics, which is e-commerce in the B2B industry. I'm Garrett Schwegler, the program manager for digital commerce in our go-to-market and solutions team. Sanjay and I work together, and my background is on the client side, so have done the search manager and taxonomy management for a B2B retailer previously. And so I've been the boots on the ground and understand a lot of the friction points from the end users, but also the opportunities that we have when trying to solve those problems. So excited to be here and to have a chat with you all. Just a little bit about LucidWorks, if anybody is unfamiliar. We are the leaders when it comes to search and browse experiences for digital commerce, but also have solutions across other verticals, including customer service and knowledge management. And just a couple of our relevant B2B accounts there to take a look at. We do have operations all around the world, so 300 employees, primarily here in the US, but also have offices through Europe and Asia Pacific. So a lot of us are probably in one of these 3 camps, and which is why we're here. All right. So the first camp, I like to use this analogy, right? So we have the Flex Tape product. I don't know if anybody's ever used it, but I have, and it kind of works, right? So there's companies who have gone out there and purchased some of these contemporary product discovery or search solutions to plug a leaky funnel, your commerce funnel. And it turns out that it's still leaking, right? And so that's why probably many of us are here. Some of us are probably in camp 2, where there's a legacy platform that you might be on, right? Like an Endeca or something like that, where it hasn't come up to date with the machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities that a lot of solutions have today. And so there's camp 2, and camp 3, I like to think about as using a product discovery solution that comes with another solution, and generally that's your commerce platform. And those are not great at everything, which is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Like, you know, the knife works, but if you've ever tried to use that to screw in a Phillips head screw, it's not the best tool for it. And so, you know, I think this might resonate with some of the audience who is having trouble solving these friction points in their B2B business. So, you know, we're all here because these problems are big, right? The amount of revenue and lost opportunities that are plaguing our business is not an easy problem to solve. But today, hopefully, we can give you a couple nuggets on how to solve these. So, recently, I and my wife went to Grand Teton National Park. So that might look like a familiar picture in the top right. We hiked Middle Teton, and so the bottom picture is just above, I think, 12,500, 12,800 feet, and you're way up there, and you know, it looks maybe if you're afraid of heights, the exposure there is kind of intense. But it was really fun to hike, and you know, I have conversations with my mom, and I'm telling her about our adventures, and you know, the one thing that she generally comes back with is, you know, that mountain climbing is risky. And you know, I say, well, we tend to take calculated risks, right? And risk is really the function of likelihood and consequence. And if anybody out here is a scholar in math, you understand that if you introduce a zero into a multiplication problem, you are able to eliminate risk when we're looking at this one. So, you know, sometimes she'll say, you're going out there, you're going to get struck by lightning, and you know, you're up on the mountain and there's storms rolling in, it's unpredictable, and you know, there's times of year when that is true, and you have a forecast, and on that particular hike, there's a saddle right below the summit where you're still safe and you can see the weather coming in. And so if I can eliminate the likelihood, right, then I've eliminated the risk. And of course, the consequence of getting struck by lightning is high, but if you eliminate the likelihood, you've eliminated the risk. She also says, you know, you're gonna slip off this mountain and kill yourself. And I said, yeah, like that maybe that may happen, but if the consequence is eliminated in this equation, right? Like there are opportunities to slip, but there's not actually an exposure on this particular trail that would lead to a consequence like that. So, so we've eliminated the risk again. You might be saying, well, you know, why are we talking about this? And you know, I often tell my mom that, you know what, mountain climbing is not risky, denied. But really what I like to say is that context is key here, and context is everything. And that's really the thread that we want to pull on in this conversation today. Sanjay will get to a little bit of that when we talk about the solutions, but it's a critical element to reducing and eliminating friction. And so I'm not sure if anybody is familiar. This is Alex Hanold. This is from Free Solo, where he's climbing El Capitan in Yosemite, which is a 3,000-foot vertical granite rock without any ropes. And so I tell my mom, I'm not doing this. This is risky. The likelihood of something happening is high. The consequence is high. He's not even wearing a helmet because he knows at this point it's not going to do anything for him. So context is everything. This is not what my wife and I are doing on the weekends. So let's bring this back to what we're all here for today, right? Is trying to understand what the problems are and identify solutions for them. And so here's a search from a site where I'm typing in 10W30. And when we think about context, you know, the results are relevant here, right? They've recalled oil. But when you think about who the shopper is, we could deliver a totally different experience, right? Am I running an automotive shop? Am I doing marine or boat repairs, right? There's different oils that are specific for those industries, and understanding who that shopper is gives you the context to change the experience to have more relevant products at the top, right? And re-rank the products. And then thinking about thinking about when we get to the product detail page here, there's a list of recommenders. And again, context is key. If I've gotten to this page, there's a pretty high intent that I know what I'm looking for and trying to buy. So recommending other oil at this point is probably not going to get a lot of engagement, right? I think we're at the point now where it's, do you need oil change equipment? Do you need the pads that can absorb oil, or soap to wash your hands to cut the grease, right? There's opportunities that we can, with an understanding of context, have a better experience and deliver a bigger impact to the business. So another example here, this search is very explicit of what I'm looking for. So I'm giving all the context. I want a 5,000 watt fan with a heater and a light for the shop room. And so I get there's 3 products back, right? And it's a fan with a light and it's 5,000 watts, but it's not able to pick up that explicit intent in the language that I've used for the query. And so the search engine is completely overlooking products that are in the catalog that can meet my goals. And so this is friction that gets introduced and is potentially going to be sending this customer somewhere else to find this product. And just one more series of examples here. This was an interesting one. So I've typed in freezer, and again, these are freezers. This might be a redirect that's intercepting the query and sending me to the freezer category page just by taking a look at the breadcrumbs there. So the context here may be relevant for most people and the results, but when you start introducing context, for me, I wasn't actually looking for a freezer. So I type in solder freezer, and still the redirect is kicking in. They're probably dropping a token in the query here and sending me to the category. So with another query, right, hammering at this thing, freezer spray is what I wanted. But when you think about the customers engaging with your site, they know what they want and they want it fast, and they don't want to have to search for it 3 times. And so trying to pick up on that intent within context of who that shopper is can be challenging, but is the best way to reduce a lot of this friction that they're experiencing. So the problems are really big, right? This couple stats here, which is essentially saying that personalization is really important when it comes to B2B, and understanding who your shoppers are, what they're looking for, what part of the purchase journey they're in is critical, and the expectations are high. And just a quick stat here, 80% of the B2B buyers have switched from suppliers that are unable to align their services with buyer expectations. This is an alarmingly high number, especially when you think you have your contracts in place and your customers aren't going anywhere else. If you're not delivering a top-notch experience, you're at very high risk. So the opportunities are also really big. This is from a DC 360 article, actually, in which Granger said 75% of sales are being processed digitally, and that number continues to grow. It was mostly accelerated by the shift in behavior from the pandemic, but has been growing for years. So I find this to be exciting, right? We're in the business and commerce, and it's the fastest growing line of business for a lot of accounts. But this is also really risky, right? If you're getting all this new traffic to your site, you have a huge opportunity to spoil your relationship with customers if you're not delivering a great experience. Just want to run through another quick math problem here. The amplified impact story is really big when it comes to B2B, right? We're talking small percentage point shifts in the experience that adds up to real money. So if you're a $400 million business and we bring up the AOV just a little bit and the conversion just a little bit, that's a 50% jump in your revenue. And then if we start adding traffic on top of that, right, as your end users start to shift to commerce, we're up to $750 million. So we've almost doubled the business with incremental shifts. So just try to think about this in the context of we don't need to go out and get a 50% increase in conversion, right? If we are reducing friction, even just a little bit, and chipping away at it, we're going to have a huge impact on our business. So here's just a quick stat. This is also from the DC 360 article. The importance to your end users, the number one important thing is the ease of finding a product by way of search and navigation. And then there's all kinds of other things that are part of your relationship with them, right? But the number one thing that's important to them is the ease of finding a product with search and navigation. So we'll dive into the details of how we can do that better. When it comes to B2B companies, what's most important? And so this probably resonates with lots of you. Not only is it shifting the focus and investing more in e-commerce, but if you take a look at some of these, e-commerce comes up, or digital experience comes up in almost all of these, right? So what I like to glean from this is there's alignment between our end users and your business, right? This is critical. And I'm going to hand it over to Sanjay now. He's going to dive in a little bit more specifically to some of these friction points, what's causing them, and how we can solve them.
Yeah, so what we wanted to start with was really now time for a poll, and we wanted to survey the audience here on what they feel is their areas of focus right now around improving that experience, and areas of pain they may be experiencing with their end customers. And so here we'd like you could select one or more of the following. First being reducing buyer friction. So much of what Garrett went through around reducing the purchase path, making it simpler for them to find and discover products. Another one would be long tail queries and intent identification, right? So how do we predict that customer's intent, and especially when they have longer or more complex, sophisticated queries, which we see a lot in B2B. Personalization, again, very pervasive topic now across the board, regardless if you're B2B or B2C, and if that's a big focus. Data and operational challenges might be where you might have a wealth of data sitting around in your organization, but it's siloed, or it's difficult, or it has just not been used in an actionable way. And then finally, the focus on driving more of a cutting edge experience, taking advantage of some more on trend technologies. Okay, so give it one last call here, and then we're going to show the results here in a second. All right, let's see how so here's here's how the audience responded, and it looks like data and operational challenges have been as sort of the leader here, and that makes sense. I think something we'll talk about and address is there's a lot of other sources of rich information, whether it's customer platforms, product platforms, supply chain platforms, that provide a lot of great input into the experience. So we're definitely talk about that. And then we see personalization being a very hot topic. So I guess definitely aligned with what all surveys have been showing under buyer friction. So excellent. Thank you everyone who's voted. So I'm going to talk about these topics in specific and solutions to these. So let's get into these specific solutions. Reducing buyer friction. So I think what we see when we survey the end buyer or the end customer, what they're looking for is a very performant, which means very quick, very simple, convenient, and an informative experience, right? That's very aligned to them, basically their background, their industry, what they're trying to accomplish. And so how do we do that? And these are the tactics, keeping it simple. Usability, obviously, and tools, including search, are very important. but also within that search, making it extremely easy for the search to detect their intent. If they're looking for a part, if they've got some additional parameters in their query to identify a specific need. And just as important is maybe they're not quite sure and they don't have all the requirements defined, but they want to discover that. And that's kind of where the browse piece comes in, to make sure you're driving an experience that's very easy for them to discover new items. Making it informative. So this is going back to the data problem too that we see out there, is you have a ton of content. Maybe you have content from your suppliers or manufacturers, or it might be just sitting out there in a multitude of different sources, even from your offline team in print. Where, bringing that in and having, a tool to essentially bring that in and enrich your shopping experience, enrich your product data is key. And that is a very important piece we see in B2B, is having content almost equally as important as just the product data, and to help that customer make their decision. But more importantly, we're seeing B2B buyers kind of act more like B2C buyers, where they want, if you want to call it social proof or collaborative opinions on a product, right? And what are my cohorts? What are similar folks in my industry buying or using? That's a very important piece that ML and AI can bring to the table. Even trending in my industry, what's the latest products or features people are using? And obviously making it as interactive as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about conversational applications, but allowing that sort of bi-directional conversational aspect is very important now. Relevancy, we cannot hamper on this more, but when we talk about context in B2B, most of you may already have a customer logging in where you have some degree of profile data on them. So taking that data, whether it's the industry they belong to, even the trade they belong to, the location they're coming from, all of that is important. Even the time of year, it could be a seasonal influence that is being incorporated into the purchasing. So these are really key, and that's some easier things we can see we get in B2B, because most of you probably are using some sort of CRM or contract platform. Personalization, and taking it a step further, being able to predict or detect their intent from their behavior, but also looking at others who are similar to that user, to like what we call cohorts, right? And looking at their behavior and understanding what's the best outcome. You may hear models out there that are called expert or influencers. We hear this in a lot of other domains, where we follow what we consider to be a professional's experience and what the way they behave, and borrowing from that. We have seen out there in the industry where maybe you don't have a ton of data on your B2B channel, but you have a lot of behavior in your B2C channel. Bringing in a lot of that data may help inform your B2B experience. Okay. And finally, it's empathetic, right? So it does understand that context, that customer's industry, what kind of job they need to perform, what kind of goal they're trying to accomplish, to align the experience accordingly. That's what B2B buyers are always asking for. Performant is key. We all know we're used to Google type performance, right? And we're talking about milliseconds, and so just as important now, even in B2B. And for those of you who are marketing your products out to SEO, for example, milliseconds count, and that's very important, as well as being able to adapt to different devices and touch points. So that's key. What we want to just show some examples of, is here's when we think about enriching an experience and bringing in content. Here I'm searching for a term, and I started picking things because we all know viruses and those sorts of things are on the top of everyone's mind, and just picking on a site here where I'm searching for antibodies. And here we've got, the behavior of the crowd, right? Crowd intelligence coming to suggest queries, but also understanding the group the customer may be in to drive experiences, right? And so here I'm, not only driving results based on that intent and shortening the path, but also including additional sources we'll get into, which is not like a knowledge base or bringing in content that's supporting. So for those of you who have more technical products or sophisticated products, that type of information is indispensable, right? And when we think about context, it could be as simple as what behavior the user has exhibited, what category did they come in, where did they land, or it could be given in a profile that we know this customer belongs to a lab, this customer belongs to an educational institution, right? And again, bringing in those behaviors across those different touch points to narrow down the experience for them. Okay. And sorry about that. And then just to talk a little bit about intent, that's the next important one is, how do we use machine learning now to accelerate that purchase process and allow or to reduce the number of steps the customer has to execute to allow us to understand what they're looking for, right? And I think many of you might have seen out there, sites which you'll start with search, or you'll come in a category and then you have to keep drilling down to another category and another category. By the time you get to your right result, if you think about where everything's going, it's really like a flat catalog and letting the machine just pick the items without really having to consider category in a way is, I think, the goal, because it's just going directly at the attributes or what the customer's intent is. So just to think about, when we look at intent, we think about current intent, behavior patterns, right? So of similar industries. So thinking about trade groups and how similar users who have the same practice or same type of trade are behaving, as well as their context, as well as what are they searching for, how are they reacting to the results, and then we start getting into more advanced topics like semantic search, semantic predictions, as well as including all the types of data you may have. Do not limit again to just your e-commerce data. You may have a lot of data in your knowledge bases, your customer service, your content systems that are indispensable, and let the machine decide really what's important for the user. Okay. So intent detection, take it a little further. In practice, we see a lot of intent detection being used in type ahead or auto suggest, and that's where we're making predictions, and that would be including crowdsourced, but not in like you might see in B2C where it's all the crowd. Here we're showing specific to your industry, right? Excuse me, specific to your region. And as we go with e-commerce, you might be not just suggesting products, but categories or other attributes, types of products, content for that matter, videos, right? And also incorporating recommendations in that type ahead. If you think about the Amazon experience and Google experience now, the power of that search bar is really well recognized even by all users now. And so that's what we're seeing most folks like to engage and drive a lot of engagement with, or starting to trust that. Vocabulary is important. When we think about the vocabulary, and there's a lot of capabilities now in the search realms, particularly around getting domain specific languages and dictionaries and knowledge graphs you'll hear about. It's really making sure that that's incorporated in your experience, the industry terminology, the lingo, right, the trade language. The great thing about the machine learning is that it can pick up that. It can detect a lot of that based on behaviors. Synonyms, right? And I know many of you probably spend a lot of time trying to build a lot of these libraries or dictionaries, and a lot of that can be inherited now or learned. And then again, you may, for those of you who have very large customers, there may be customer specific language. I've seen a lot where products are labeled, or even the part numbers are specific to a specific customer, and making sure that that gets incorporated in their searches so they can find, for example, their own specific organizational items, and not showing them items that their organization doesn't have access to. We talk about context a number of times, so the situation that customer's in, their time frame, for example, There could be an underlying circumstance like a weather event that should be taken into account, for example, or those of you in certain industries like cleaning supplies I've seen, or repair, right? Where there's a lot of flooding, there's been a hurricane, there's a snowstorm, right? Those sorts of things, or construction. And then by the segment. And so these are segments many of you may already have. Again, we mentioned a CRM or a customer data platform like a CDP. One of the great things is that machines today can actually get that segment and learn how to treat that segment, what products make sense for that segment. So when we think about the data silo, that's a great one to incorporate and make that all that segmentation or affinities you've developed actionable and utilize it in your experiences in B2B, right, to make it that much more relevant. And then visitor specific really gets into what is it about that specific buyer or that customer, right? What do they prefer? What are those attributes? Is it a lead time? Is it a price range? Is it a certain feature or characteristic, right? Again, compliance is a big one we see as well, right? Do they have to adhere to specific compliance? And so these are things that should all be incorporated into intent. An example here with safety glasses, we're searching for safety glasses and getting intent. So depending on the audience, right, and depending on the type of work I may be doing, you will suggest the corresponding compatible safety glasses. And that comes into like what predicting even specific categories where we may suggest categories and warm up the actual experience based on what we know about you already or what's been told to us based on your profile or your company's industry, for example. And in addition, bypassing the actual experience where the customers have to keep on searching or clicking and predicting the items, right? Predicting their intent and showing the items right up front where they can get done with their purchase immediately within one step potentially or two, right? For those who have add to cart buttons, for example. Another example here is showing recommendations, right? And this is where we're talking about cohorts. Here you're seeing, customers like you, right? Customers in your trade, customers in your business while they're typing to show relevant products using recommendations inside your predicted search or type ahead. Excuse me. Another example here now is vocabulary we were talking about. Here's a simple one where bubbly water, it doesn't exist in any of these corpus or terms inside these products or content, but that relationship is built by the machine learning or a knowledge base that's been given so that it automatically knows this and showing corresponding products. So that helps, where customers have to keep on changing their terms like Garrett had to do to get to the right result. Let's talk a little bit about personalization. So when we think about B2B, and a lot of this will be sort of overlapping what we've been saying, again, you definitely want to consider personalization at a bare minimum by the industry the customer's in or trade group, right? They're buying on behalf of an organization department. If they belong and they're buying across departments, making sure we take into account maybe the trade or industry that department is for especially larger organizations. Location season is another one we see depending on your business, especially if you have seasonal products. That's an important one to incorporate that you can get, and making sure that that is incorporated into the results where you don't want to show something that's completely irrelevant or not even applicable to that location. May not even be available, right? This even gets into tying your back office data, such as your inventory locations, to make sure we're showing the right result based on the customer's location. By organization. So this is another level, right? Which is, what is my organization doing, right? So, what are their limits? And we all know contract catalogs and pricing are part of the things that we'll obviously incorporate, but there might be other buyers in an organization and there's a pattern that you want to incorporate, but as well as incorporating their own products, maybe the way they're labeled, maybe the terminology or vocabulary specific to organization should be incorporated, but also just the overall history. Maybe buyers change, so there's a little bit of a memory or stateful pattern of all the order history that's occurred, search history to allow the new buyer to come in, or if you have multiple buyers, just to hand off things. Okay. And then by the end user themselves, right? And so if you do have some segmentation already occurring, making sure those get sent in the form of a signal so that the system can learn how to improve what products are shown for that segment, if you haven't already, but also in a back-end perspective, allow you to merchandise, right, or drive assortments based on these aspects, right? User, organization, or context. And usually for users, we'll look at segments, their own history as well. And then any omnichannel data, we advise that we still see in B2B a lot of interactions in call center and other touch points. So we do advise that you bring in that data to help enhance, obviously, the experience across the board, but drive that connected journey as well, which is very important in B2B. And then any preferences that customer may have. For those of you who do surveys or opt-in, Q&As, that's obviously an important one. And then finally is where it's more real time, but based on their actual interactions. What are they clicking on? What are they searching on? How are they reacting to the results? That's where more of the real time aspect comes, where we get more into the individual one-to-one for B2B. Okay. Now, sorry about that. And for personalization, some examples here. In this example here, I pretend I'm in. I work on gas and installations and gas piping in houses. For example, I'm in construction. So if that was passed to me, then the first set of results when I search for fittings should be in that context. Just to give you an example, right? That either I've detected that is, or I've logged in, or that's been passed that I'm in, that's my trade, right, is in gas. So then here I'm seeing more gas fittings when I search for fittings. Similarly, I could have been in plumber, and when I search for fittings as a plumber, I'm seeing things that are more aligned to plumbing tasks, that are waterproof, for example, as well, right? And that can handle water and rust proof, for example, all the way to I'm an electrician, or I'm in electrical industry, and I'm showing fittings that are around electrical contexts, right? So you're seeing conduit that's supporting more electrical use cases versus water, plumbing versus gas, right? And that's a real simple example. I imagine most of you have at least like a SIC code, or an industrial classification or NAIC code, maybe from the organization that logs in based on your relationship. That could be enough to start learning and dictating what to show for that user if you don't have your data already labeled. Okay, now data, this was a big one. I know it came up for everyone. So let's think about content, and I think what we want, one of the bigger things we hear is our data is in a poor form for e-commerce. It's really noisy. There's a lot of things just in a description field. It's not really attributed. So the great thing is, and talk about what machine learning can do is crawl and extract important tokens or topics out of that content, and improve it for applications like search or browse or recommendations, right? But also just to count in to make sure that content is made available. And so what we see with B2B, you might have a catalog going out to print for print catalogs. I know there's still a lot of that. You may actually have manufacturing data or other data providers who review content, like PIMs that are external or internal PIMs. And then you have user-generated content. I think this is getting to be a bigger trend too, not just obviously it's been there in B2C, but in B2B, leveraging user-generated content like FAQs, reviews, and again, incorporating all the touch points is key. There's a lot of data that might be coming out of your field sales or call center that should be looked at, right, or incorporated in. And that's where some of this enrichment comes. So With machine learning today now, where you might have been spending a lot of time trying to organize or classify your content, the machine can look at it, look at knowledge bases and knowledge graphs and understand and build a taxonomy automatically. It might automatically tag or classify your items. We talk about labeling as well, because it looks at those terms and phrases. It looks at the behaviors of the users and can actually build relationships, which is really powerful. And then the deep learning applications, where maybe you don't have much textual content. We need to look at videos or images to extract important topics or tokens out of that. So there's a wealth of applications here, but that gets into enriching that experience, whether we're enriching just your product catalog search or content, or even the recommendations or other FAQ chatbot applications you may have. Integration, again, you've probably heard this many times for those especially on, omni-channel or ERP platforms, where we think about unifying your customer record, bringing your product data and centralizing it. Many of you already have a PIM, incorporating your PIM. E-commerce is probably one view of that PIM, and making sure you expose all of that to enrich the experience. Maybe you're not going to show everything in the PIM, but that might be used to determine what to show, because there might be underlying data there that's important. And then signals, when we think about signals, they could be transactional, they could be returns, they're positive, they're negative signals. They could be questions, right, that are around a product, in addition to all the click stream. So we want to get that across the enterprise. And then you may have analytics that already exist, and you're generating a lot of insights and intelligence that should be brought in as well. Consistency is important, especially for those who sell across call center, call center and web, and across devices potentially. So again, carrying a profile over, carrying that state over, and also that intent over as that purchase journey occurs. We hear in B2B, it might take around 4 to 6 visits before a purchase is made, right? Depending on the price point too, it could even go higher, right? So maintaining that state so that customer doesn't have to start over, I think, is very key. But also, as the handoff occurs from one touch point to another, is really important. I'm going back to like an example here, where I'm searching and bringing some content in. Well, I could crawl my content repositories, my CMS, or other sources of content to enrich what's in the product, right? And here we're showing documents and support for the same query. And again, that's assisting. For example, here I might be part of a lab and trying to understand, is this product going to be a fit for our needs, right? As we're doing research. And again, my behavior is here being recorded, right, into that profile. So wherever I start, I might have started on the train, gone to my work, and I'm working off my desktop or laptop, and then maybe on a tablet as I'm going remotely somewhere else. So finally, the last topic we talk about is trending technologies. And so what we're seeing across the board, and what, again, customers and buyers are expecting, is what they already interact with on a day-to-day basis. I think you've probably heard this many times, right? There's chatbots already used. Many folks use chatbots already for customer service applications. Again, we're seeing more of it now being used as a sales application, where it's asking questions, doing the guided type of selling that's required in e-commerce, for example, right? And guiding the user, but also still for support. So kind of marrying the two. We're seeing more voice, just because even B2B users are becoming more mobile. It's much easier than typing, on a mobile device, but that's also getting into natural language, right? And understanding the way people describe things through language, spoken language versus textual language. Smart configurators is, again, an application, and we're going to talk a little bit more about more rich applications with AR, VR with that. But configurators, again, can be something powered by a search, for example, to ask the right questions and then allow all the parameters the customer has to be incorporated. And it might be pre-configured based on, we already know who the organization is or the customer is, their trade, where we can pre-configure things more intelligently with AI rather than having to start from scratch. Vector search is something you'll probably hear more of. So we're moving now away from precise, exact, like textual matches to what we talk about with semantic matches and goal versus keyword matches, where we detect actually the customer's intent rather than having to precisely manage or match words that appear in a document. We actually can make a good educated, informed guess of what the customer's goal is and show results accordingly. That it could include alternatives. For example, in B2B, we see a lot of products that might be end of life or discontinued or just not available. What are the intelligent replacements? Or what if something's out of stock? What is an another great alternative? So this is again a great application of vector search. But also maybe you have very sparse categories, or you only have a few products for a given keyword, but you might feel, or we might find that there's additional products that are relevant for that topic. So vector search can bring that in to the example and learn from your users' behaviors on what to show. Zero results is a big problem that we see in general, and here's an opportunity that it's less the keyword match, but more what is the customer trying to accomplish in finding a result. Excuse me. And we talked about augmentation. Knowledge graphs, another big one, right? So there's domain-specific knowledge graphs. Not only do they help with entity, right, predicting that this is a category, predicting this is a measurement, predicting this is a weight, for example, in a query, but also reducing the cold starts. A lot of language might come here, a lot of relationships would come in. So this is a big area to help improve search. It's already in use by the large guys like Google and Amazon, right? Is incorporating this intelligence right at the start, and then driving experiences, and it may be category or domain specific. And then finally, we're seeing AR, VR rising, and this is just across the board. Predictions are we're going to see, by the end of 22, 40% of all these experiences being powered by AR and VR. This is a great one where you can drive more immersive experiences that can be powered by, an ML platform, ML-based platform, driving simulations. So again, as we're, thanks to COVID, again, unfortunately not be able to do a lot of things in person, this is an alternative to help drive that type of immersive experience to sell your products, without being without having to send them or send a sample, or, allow them to, in B2B, we see customization as a big, right? Custom products and configurations, and, leveraging this type of technology is huge. And then search showrooms for those with larger products, where a customer can actually literally simulate, like walk through your entire aisle or department, picking items. We're seeing the same thing, or different types of samples of products to solve a certain need. So with that, wanted to wrap on that, and then to show some examples of what we just talked about before we get into the Q&A. So here, for example, for vector search, on this example, I'm searching for plexiglass, and in this event, that doesn't occur, that term doesn't really occur inside the catalog, but through vector search, it understands what you mean, right? What you're intending, that you want a clear type of glass that's not, or clear type of material that's not glass made out of plastic. So you're seeing the educated, relevant alternatives that are shown, okay? And then here's just a little small example of a knowledge graph, right? Where we're driving relationships, where you might have searched just for Harry Potter, but then you also see the relationships between different publishers, authors, this genres, all these sorts of connections are brought in to enhance that experience. Because maybe customers may not even start with that; they might start with one of these other nodes in their search. And this is giving another example of how dynamic a knowledge graph can be, and where we move throughout different nodes and the relationships, and how it's changing based on signals. And then finally, here's this example, the AR, VR, going in or doing this from home. Okay, so here we are in the Q&A.
All right, thanks, Sanjay. Seems like we have time for about 2 or 3 questions. The first one comes from Daphna, and it's for Sanjay. What is the benchmark for clean, i.e. unassisted B2B e-commerce orders, and how does that compare to B2C?
So the benchmark for I think what we're looking at, where there's no assistance, means no chat, no customer service interaction, is the way I would interpret that aspect of it. So when we think about different benchmarks, there's a conversion rate, there's an AOV, there's other sub benchmarks such as the revenue per visit. So I think what we see, for when we think about benchmarks, we think about lift and incremental lift as well, and what do you expect? So by industry and by category. So I would say those are benchmarks you want, and they are domain or industry specific. We do know that in B2B, your customer is captive, so conversion's less important. Where we see more folks using benchmarks like AOV or revenue per visit lift or incremental lift, is what we generally see. Hopefully that helped with that answer.
Okay. And second question just came in from Rod. Do you know any B2B success stories in the health market? Some reference company?
The health market would be there's a number, and when I look at health and medical, I think of Thermo Fisher or Regeneron as a couple like notable health customers. Kaiser Permanente, from like healthcare perspective, leveraging these types of capabilities for their end patients, but also their employees, right? Just as important as sometimes bringing that knowledge, like that interconnection between what your employees are generating as well, whether they're nurses or doctors, but also an author's there, but as well as what patients are asking for, kind of bringing that in there. So those are some examples. And then Thermo Fisher, more healthcare, more lab clinics, healthcare providers using those sorts of things are some nice examples that I like.
Okay, and the next one is, what kind of data is helpful to collect to start personalizing and give context?
Yeah, so one thing I mentioned was that if you do have a customer profile system in place and you have some form of segmentation already occurring, that segmentation would be a great element to send over as the customer is interacting in the form of signals that we would call. For example, when they log in, we know what segment they belong to, or what industry they belong to, or what region they belong to, would be common ones. Again, it's the nature of your catalog, but common ones we'll see are industrial or trade segment, like a SIC code. That's a standard industrial classification code. Or we'll see a code that gets even down further to like a geo location, right, which is a big one too, because there's some variation there. And then if you do have some sub-segmentation, for example, that occurs in your marketing or CRM platform, that would be helpful as well.
Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. Next one came in from Mary. Do you have any examples of companies that service both B2B and B2C in the same site and cross-utilize data?
Yeah, there's numerous ones. Actually, we're seeing this happening a lot with direct-to-consumer manufacturers in particular, who want to better own their customer, but allow give their customers the ability to sell or configure products and customize them. I think that's been around for a while. You know, Nike is a good example. Kohler is a good example. You know, and then on the other end, you've got, you know, your Lululemon, for example, who are clothes or apparel manufacturers, right? And I think it's going back to the wealth of data you might have in your consumer channel, right? And how those end consumers are reacting and bringing that and informing your B2B channel, right? And your buyers and your end retailers or resellers on what's actually occurring out there. I think that's the beauty of bringing that together.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question. Actually, just came in, another one from Rod. He said, maybe my question was not understood. For example, Siemens sells medical equipment to hospitals. Another suppliers sell surface masks. Do you know some marketplace B2B in healthcare?
Yeah, as far as B2B marketplace, that I know Briggs is one that's out there that I'm pretty aware of. You know, Philips has some as well. Those would be some examples of customers who are doing that. That you've got obviously the pharmaceutical pharmacies, large pharmacies too, like CVS or Walgreens, even kind of doing this more at a consumer level, where, you know, they're trying to personalize some of that experience based on the customer's behavior too. So it's again matching the signals for that user, and again, location's a big one for that, right? The climate, and as well as what other users like the cohorts are doing over there.
Okay, I think that'll wrap up our Q&A today. Thank you to Sanjay and Garrett for the presentation, and to all of our audience for listening. There will be a replay of this webinar available. After we conclude, you'll see a pop-up window on your screen asking you to provide feedback on today's webinar. If you can, please take a few moments to fill this out. Your feedback helps us plan future webinar topics and understand what kinds of presentations work best. Also, please keep an eye out for our weekly email to find out what other webinars we have planned, or visit digitalcommerce360.com to see our upcoming schedule or view our library of archived webinars. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.